Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to another AERO South Africa webinar in conjunction with Safety First Aviator. It's great to be back hosting webinars again as we build up to AERO 2023. Our speakers share their insights and knowledge in the hope that you'll all be safer and more cautious before takeoff. The webinar tonight will be addressing changing of seasons. My name is Neil Piper, the Head of Marketing and Content for Mesa Frankfurt, South Africa, and I'll be hosting the webinar tonight. Unfortunately, due to load shedding, the Portfolio Director and my colleague, Annelie Reynolds, the Show Director of AERO South Africa, is unable to deliver her welcome speech in person. So unfortunately, you're stuck with me. I'm going to do that on her behalf. So here goes. AERO South Africa will take place from 6th to 8th July 2023 at Wonderboom National Airport. This will be the third installment, and we are proud to announce that our partnership with the City of Tshwane as host city and Wonderboom Airport as the venue has been extended by another 2 years. 2022 saw the second edition of AERO South Africa, which was a roaring success with more than 3,200 visitors, 72 exhibitors across 5,106 square meters on the apron. It really was such a wonderful event and a great way to get going again after COVID. Our first exhibitors for 2023 have confirmed, and I'm going to run through the guys that have already confirmed: Poolies, Vector Aviation, Wings and Things, Bose, Schmidt, Pilot Insure, DJA Aviation, Aeronautical, Concord Group, Sling, Concord Battery, Drone Exhibitors, that's very new to AERO, that's NTSU Aviation, Paxis, and if you're looking to get a stand, please head to the AERO website. All the information about booking a stand is there for you. Then there's a Wonderboom fly-in, just a little bit of information that I'd like to share. Our AERO South African partners, Wonderboom National Airport, the City of Tshwane, and Villa San Giovanni Restaurant is hosting a fly-in and classic car morning on Saturday, the 29th of October, in celebration of Transport Month. Aircraft, classic car, and classic motorcycle owners are invited to participate and join the fun at the Wonderboom Airport. Entry is free, but pre-registration is required, and registration closes on the 28th of October at 12 o'clock midday. Spectators will be accommodated at the restaurant, which overlooks the apron. So registration, it is mandatory. You need to head to the Villa San Giovanni website. It's www.vsg.co.za, www.vsg.co.za for more information, and please visit their website. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd now like to introduce the panelists for tonight, all our speakers. I know you know most of them, and it's really good to have them back. Let me start with Andre Roos, Aviation Risk Specialist, Claims and Accident Investigator. So Andre has 25 years of experience in aviation. He consults for local and international insurance company as an aviation risk specialist, claims and accident investigator. Andre is the highest qualified air accident investigator in South Africa with a master's degree in safety and accident investigation. He is currently a PhD candidate run through Cranfield, UK, on the topic of suicide by aircraft. Andre is also a published author, conference speaker, and licensed pilot. He owns and operates a Pioneer 300 LSA from Morningstar Airfield in Cape Town. It's good to have you here, Andre, and nice to have another Cape Townian with us. Then moving on to Ari Levine, representing Mayday SA. Ari is enjoying his 32nd year of flying as a general automotive pilot. He is an IT professional with a passion for information security. He is a longtime student of aviation safety and has been a member of Mayday since 2018. Ari, great to have you on board again. Thank you for making the time. And then last, but definitely by no means least, Lauren Smith of Weather South Africa. Lauren is a meteorologist based in the Cape Town Weather Office. She has a big passion towards aviation and the weather forecasting sector. She's been part of this campaign for the past 5 years. Lauren, I know that you're busy with your master's. You're almost done, right? So it's been a crazy couple of months for you. So our timing with this webinar is perfect. And just welcome to all of you. And thank you so much for being here tonight. And then just to all of our delegates, if I can ask that you post all your questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will address them towards the end of the webinar. And please note that all delegates of the webinar tonight will receive a recording of the webinar. And if we don't get to all the questions, we'll try to get to them post-webinar. Okay, I think it's time to get started. That's long enough introduction from me. It's time for me to take a break now and hand over to you, Andre.
All right, thank you. Yes, thanks everybody. It's always nice to address you. I got a very short discussion tonight, but a very important one. So let me first try and get the screen sharing. This is the nervous part of everything for me. Okay, let's see. That's it goes, and you're supposed to see that. All right, fantastic. So tonight's topic is sparked by an accident that I've had
Andre,
yes.
Sorry, Andre, it's Neil. Just try that again, please.
Are you not seeing a slide?
Yeah, we're not seeing. Just give it one more go, and if it's not working, I'll share from my side.
Yeah, I hate these things. Don't know why they do that. Okay, so it says share. Okay.
There we go.
And then let's try again. Does it work now?
Perfect. Thank you,
right.
Andre.
It's always.
It's Murphy.
Anyway,
it's Murphy.
Yeah. So mine is also the next hour, like the whole of the year, but after impact. So after impact is obviously not something we want to discuss, but it's very important. So tonight's topic is sparked by an accident that I have a very quite keen interest in. And I was in Spain a few weeks ago doing a through hike, and one of the hikers I met was a German guy, and we started talking, and he talked about his friend that he lost in a crash in South Africa. Turns out to be the gentleman in the screen here. This particular accident, without going into great detail, was a survivable accident. The pilot, after impact, did manage to go back into the wreck and get the passengers out, but in the process, he suffered quite an extensive burn wounds. And the problem was then the location. They didn't know where they were. Emergency services couldn't get hold of them. They couldn't communicate. After the radio call, there was no further contact. They had no way of communicating. And they ended up walking a considerable distance. And he had virtually more than 90% burn wounds. So you can imagine how aggravating that must be. Long story short, the post-impact, the golden hour, that is what was wasted in this particular instance, and unfortunately cost the life of this precious individual. There are many accidents like that. So we know about the golden hour. It's in the medical industry, it's very, very critical, and basically it's defined as a concept that critically injured patients are required to receive definitive care within 60 minutes from occurrence of injuries. So, and at this forum, we want you to stay in the air or to go to the ground in a controlled manner and stay away from Earth. But if it happens, you've got this emergency landing. Another incident that I worked on was a landing, and then the plane flipped over. So the vertical stabilizer is not a roll bar that collapsed because the head's close to the canopy. There was some head injuries, and as you know, or probably know, a head injury bleeds phenomenally. Even though it's not potentially life-threatening, this particular one, the pilot had so much blood on his hands that he couldn't actually use his method of communicating, which I'll discuss now, with anybody, and it ended up walking, again, I think 5 or 6 kilometers to try and find help. So once you're to the ground, you want to be able to communicate properly. Now, recently in our local flight school, in our chat group, there was discussions about it, and most people went for this option. And the option was the mobile phone. And they said, well, we fly in the Western Cape, or everywhere we fly, there's always cell reception. Cell phones are, can give you location, it can do a lot of things. And one individual still shared that, he's even developing a track and trace kind of a device that, or app that can go onto your cell phone, so you can use it for emergencies and communicating. There's lots and lots of things like this. That unfortunately is a problem, because I want to discuss quickly this particular thing about cell phones. The first problem is, of course, they require reception. Actually, I actually want to put the first one as point 3. First of all, they are very low impact resistance. They break very easily. I had the privilege of spending quite a bit of time at the Air Accident Investigation Bureau in Farnborough in the UK. And because I have electronics background myself, I spent a lot of time in the electronics lab, and there's countless phones there and devices that add impact. They're not designed to be impact resistant. So the chances of actually losing the telephone, its ability to work, is very high. Then they obviously require cell phone reception. Now, to rely on cell phone reception in emergency, it's a big gamble, because the chances that you won't have cell phone reception is quite high. Then they have a relatively short battery life. So, and most often maybe if you leave the wreckage, or the wreckage is damaged to a point, you cannot charge this phone. So that is also a big problem. And then what I want to challenge you, this is what I think very few people think about, is the screens. So when you go after this seminar, please do me one favor. Just take your hand, like this, dip it in some water, and see if you can. You see, I can't even unlock my phone. See if you can operate your phone. I'm trying to unlock it. Let's try and unlock it. It doesn't want to unlock. I just got some water on my hands. So imagine it there. Come on. I'm trying to. You can see I cannot unlock this phone. Trying to. There, I might get. It's my beautiful daughter. I still cannot unlock this phone. That is a problem, and it's actually recorded in an accident report where the individual just had blood on his hands because of the head wound. I cannot remember the exact aircraft and time it happened, but I remember the incident very well. Blood on your hands, oil, sand, dirt. How frustrating it must be that you've got this adrenaline pumping through your body. You've got shock. You've got adrenal dump after the shock. And you're trying to communicate, and you simply cannot use this very sensitive touchscreen because your hands are dirty, there are blood, or there's something on it. So please, after this presentation, go and try and unlock your phone, try and send a message with your hands, just with water, and you'll see that it's virtually impossible. So the big message is, to mobile phones, you cannot rely on them for communication after an accident. So I'm going to go through a couple of options quickly. Of course, there's costs involved in that, but you need to be able to communicate your emergency. So the next option, laugh or not, is the burner phone. Yes, you can stalk your ex with it, and you can do also other stuff as well, I suppose. But if you cannot afford my last option, then just have a burner phone. I've got this little one that I used to use. I don't know, it probably costed $150. I don't know, it's tiny, but remarkably, it's quite crash resistant. So it's got a much higher impact resistance. Yes, it's got some of the drawbacks. Battery life are still long. You remember those old Nokia 5110s? You can keep the thing on for 2 weeks. And you only have simple little touch buttons. So you don't have to have a fancy, complicated screen to operate. And having a little burner phone with a pay-as-you-go card just stuck into your plane somewhere could be an absolute life changer, or lifesaver, not changer, but lifesaver. Could be a changer as well, depending on what business you are in. But yes, so if you can't have the last thing I want to say is, then I'd say go for a burner phone, put it in your plane on the pay-as-you-go contract, because it's easy to operate, high crash resistance, low in weight, no touch sensitive screens, and a very long battery life. Of course, the one big drawback on a burner phone or any type of phone is you would still require cell phone reception. So then we go to the last option. I know this is a very simple message today, but once you read reports and you realize an individual his life could have been saved had we used that golden hour, or had the pilot in the first screen. If you could just get these passengers out, find a cool space under the tree and wait for emergency service to arrive, most likely it would have been with us today, as opposed to walking a few hours in the sun with that massive burn wounds. So this is really a simple but important message. So my last slide is satellite communicators. So obviously this is what we want to aim for. So this is a little screenshot I took when you just Google and you say satellite communicators, and it comes up a whole bunch of options. With them, and why I want to advocate this as an absolute lifesaver, an important device that you need to have in your phone, is they're very simple. So I make use of the very first one there, the InReach Mini. It's this little thing, comes with a nice carabiner, so I hook it somewhere in my plane and it hangs there. And all I need to do is open up, there's a little emergency button over there, SOS. I press that button and I find a cool space away from my wreck and I wait for emergency services, because the global network from Garmin, they will have your location immediately and they will do all the communication work. They'll send emergency services. You don't even need to talk to them anymore. It has got two-way messaging. You can message us and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if any of you have been in any kind of accident, car accidents. I was in a major car accident a few years ago. You're quite confused afterwards, and to text messages and to text loved ones, and they must find your location, and they must phone the emergency services, and all of that. Valuable time is wasted. So there are many of these little devices on the market, very long battery life, accurate coordinates, emergency SOS support, very high. This little thing is massive in impact resistance. I use it as rock climbing as well, or hiking. I can throw this thing anywhere. It really is incredibly tough and hard. So it's got a very high impact resistance. So most likely this will survive. It's waterproof, two-way communication, and can even give you weather reports. It is an investment in the beginning, and one of the major drawbacks is it normally requires a monthly subscription. I think I'm on an emergency package, which is maybe 200 Rand or something a month. But it is unfortunate because you're using the cell phone network. There are quite a few on the market. My personal advice would be to go for one that comes with a support network, and not just one that will message all your friends that you are in emergency. That can also work. But I think ideally you want this to communicate to a support system that will do all the work for you. You can also sync this with the Garmin watch, and my Garmin watch has accident detection. It's a bit of a snack because sometimes if I brake very hard on my mountain bike, it goes emergency. But that way it can actually message without you even being involved in it. It's tiny little devices. It is a capital investment. But if I can, I'll try and find those reports and maybe share them some other time. But to see a life wasted or lost because the golden hour was wasted is unnecessary. So I really want to advocate an emergency location beacon, satellite device, or at the very least, get a cheap burner phone. So like I said, it's a very simple presentation today. I thank you for this time, and I hope this little tiny message finds home. All right, thank you.
Andre, thank you very much. Jeez, the burner phone. Hey, who would have thought? I thought my mom was the only person that used those anymore. But they're lifesaver, as you said. Who would have known? So, Andre, thank you for that message. I think it is an important one. And you obviously rate that satellite phone quite highly. Was there a little bit of a kickback there for you tonight to paint it so hard?
No, unfortunately not. I just did my homework, and the Mini is tiny and it's good. So that's I just did my homework on it. For me, it's crash resistance. It must survive impact.
100%. No, I'm only joking. But Andre, thank you so much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move over to our next speaker. Lauren Smith. Lauren is such an integral part of the team, and she is highly respected in her field of expertise. And Lauren, we're thrilled that you can join us again tonight. And on that note, over to you.
Thank you so much, Emil, and good evening, everyone. It's definitely always a privilege to be part of this. Let me share my screen. Okay. Sorry, guys, all of these things. Let's get to the presentation. Oops. Okay, hope everyone can see. So I'd like to touch on the next hour as well in terms of our coming season. And the seasonal outlook is definitely something that has been spoken about a lot more, I think, and especially with the KZN flooding and all the rain that our central and northeastern parts of the country has received in the previous summer season, as well as even into the winter. You guys up there north had a lot of rainfall. So what that is and where these seasonal outlooks come from, it's called the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and that is currently in the La Nina state, and that means we're in a wet season for the South Africa. That is the impact for us. It is expected to continue, so meaning it's then going to have its strongest impact on our rainfall duration in our mid-summer months. So the first forecast on your left is for October, November, and December. So it's a seasonal forecast. It's a forecast over those 3 months. And then in the middle, you have November, December, January. And then on your right-hand side there, it goes December, January, and February. So what this means, it is a forecast for the likelihood for below normal, normal, or above normal conditions of the parameter. So this parameter is for precipitation. It does not say what type of precipitation, but it gives us a good indication of what we can expect. So as one can see, those central parts as well as those northeastern parts for October, November, December, even November, December, and January is looking quite promising for above normal rainfall again. And then into our December, January, February forecast, one can actually see those green signals are moving slightly more to the central parts and to the western parts of the country. So what is this then? How can we interpret this? This kind of then means that we can expect systems that bring more precipitation. So in our summer season, especially for those central and northeastern parts that has summer rainfall, it has thunderstorms. Or we get tropical cloud bands that come through from those northern parts, and then they extend down to our coastal regions of Eastern Cape, and then they move up northeastwards and bring us then rain. Next parameter that we look at is temperatures. We look at the minimum temperatures as well as the maximum temperatures. So this forecast is for the minimum temperatures, and that is still expected to be above normal countrywide. So this can mean a lot of factors. For example, what keeps our maximum or our temperatures higher or lower? Cloud cover. So moisture retains heat. So when do our minimum temperatures occur? They can occur in our night or early morning. They are normally just before sunrise is the actual minimum temperature. That's when it occurs. So if this is then above normal, so if your average temperature, for example, in December in the mornings is about 14 degrees. Now the forecast is saying it's going to be above that normal average. So now we're looking maybe at 16s or 15s more often in those 3 months. So maybe 10 days instead of 5 days, we'll reach those temperatures. And what does that then mean? How do we interpret that? That now can mean, because we know that temperature is retained by moisture, moisture is cloud cover. So now we're going to have maybe more low cloud in our evenings and early morning slots, maybe more mist and fog. So maybe those days are going to be now more in our 3 months. So instead of having, again, 10 days of mist, we might now experience 20 days of mist. Similar here, our maximum temperatures are expected to be below normal. Oops, sorry. Especially for our central and those eastern parts. The model is struggling slightly to predict this parameter. As one can see, we've got a lot of white spots. It means no signal. It doesn't mean that it's going to be normal. It just means that the model is struggling to dissolve those areas. But now one can start to link these parameters slightly with each other in a broader picture. If one can remember what the green maps looked like, the precipitation forecast, those central and northeastern parts were a lot more greener. So in other words, it was above normal precipitation, and now we're sitting with below maximum temperatures. So again, that could then be linked or interpreted as more cloud cover. Our afternoon temperatures aren't going to be above normal. So again, if we are in December and in Gauteng, our average temperature is warm to quite hot, so maybe 28 to 30s in that range, and now they are below normal. So now we're expecting maybe 20s or 24s, for example. But this is an indication that maybe we're going to have more cloud cover coming through that's going to block the sun. And actually then that surface heating is then not going to be as significant as it would be in a normal summer season. One can then see in contrast, those western and southwestern parts are above normal. So one then could think, okay, what causes warmer temperatures or even just a normal average hot day in those western, southwestern parts? Offshore conditions. So more days of offshore conditions can be expected. Offshore means mountain waves, especially for those western and southwestern parts, those clear, dry days. So you're going to have a lot more thermal. So it's going to be a bumpy ride, more days maybe than less. So let's then click on just a few terminology and a refresher of IMC to VMC. Since we might be dealing with the changes a little bit more in this season than the previous season or in winter. So IMC is your instrument meteorological conditions, and these are met conditions that are expressed in terms of visibility, your distance from cloud, and your ceiling. And it's less than the minima for your that is specified for your visual met conditions. So let's have a quick look. As a reminder, so when you are flying 3,000 feet altitude above, please try and then remain 1,000 feet below your ceiling, your cloud base, and then vertically about 2 kilometers away from any cloud. Because, for example, if you're dealing with a thunderstorm, your outbursts and your downdrafts will still be able to affect you if you are only at 500 feet below your ceiling. Your visibility, preferably more than 8 kilometers if you are above 10,000 feet above mean sea level. And if you are below 10,000 feet above mean sea level, 5 kilometers and more is then expected. When you're flying then below 3,000 feet altitude, your conditions become a little bit more less strict. You can now clear of any cloud, as well as then 5 kilometers in your visibility and more, and then to stay 1,000 feet above ground level at all or any terrain is then preferred. Your control zones that is where the criteria become a little bit more stricter. And these are zones like your aerodromes and those sectors. As you can see, your distance from your ceiling becomes less, becomes now 500 feet. And then your kilometers of visibility is 5 kilometers. The people who decide when it becomes IMC from VMC or VMC back to IMC is ATNS. ATNS will make the call for their aerodrome. And where do they get then that information from? Is then from the Met Office. So they work with us in conjunction. So I just want to go through those criteria with you guys so that we all kind of understand why ATNS is jumping through VMC and IMC and those type of days. So a species is a special Met report. It's just when your META will change within that hour or within the half an hour. So your main aerodromes get sent out METAs most every half an hour, your other aerodromes hourly. So when within that time period, any of this criteria is met, the Met technicians, they will send out a species. So let's have a quick look. So when the amount of your cloud layer is below 1,000 feet, and it changes from scattered to overcast or even just to broken. So when you are, for example, at 2,000 feet and now scattered, and now your conditions are changing to broken at 1,000 feet, that warrants then a species. And also then it alerts your ATNX. Also, when the height of your base of the lowest cloud layer of your broken or overcast is lifting or goes through or to the next levels. So when the extent is lowering and passes through one or more of the following values. So your cloud base starts then from 1,000 feet and it needs to then go through 500 or through 200. That is then also linked to what we do in the forecasting office with our trends. Now the trend we'll touch on just now is that 2-hour forecast that comes behind your META. And that is where we communicate with you what is happening in the next 2 hours. Is it deteriorating or is it improving? So also same with your visibility, it needs to go through those criteria, and then when it then becomes better, it will start to improve a lot quicker. Also with your winds, when runway changes, if the runway changes really quickly. So here, for example, in Cape Town, we have a cold front coming through. It's predominantly for the day northwesterly, and then all of a sudden it's passed. Now we have that bridging high coming in behind it, and we are backing in our winds to a southwester. And that happens within a couple of minutes sometimes. So it's a drastic, quick change, and therefore it's a runway change at the Cape Town International Airport. So here are an example. I just want to touch on that in between weather so that we don't go to Andre's next hour. So that's on the bottom part are our METAs. So at the end, it says no SIG, and that is where the trend comes in. No SIG means no significant change, meaning the weather is not deteriorating. It doesn't mean that weather is now improving. It means the weather is not changing or deteriorating. That's no SIG. When there is weather, the forecaster will then put in the changing, becoming, it will improve your conditions. So just to link these METAs with the TAF that is produced at OR Tambo, as one can see, at 1300 Zulu, the observations at Wonderboom were scattered at 0 to 5. And because these aerodromes are quite close to each other, one can start putting that picture together. Okay, Wonderbrim is a little bit lower than OR Tambo, so my cloud base might increase at OR Tambo, and then an hour later, one can actually see that the cloud base did lift to about 3,000 feet. So now we've got some lifting, the sun has come through. It was Kavok during the day, and now at 12 o'clock Zulu, in the forecast, in the TAF, we've got now a band coming down. It's broken at 3,000 feet, and we are going to have a few CBs within this broken band, giving us light thunderstorms. So that's that minus TSRA. So it's not gushing down with rain. Your visibility is not going to then be impaired with the thunderstorm. So also remember that your visibility is influenced by this droplet size. So if you have showers or rain, those droplets are quite bigger than drizzle. Drizzle will deteriorate your visibility a lot more. And it doesn't even have to like drizzle quickly down or hard. The rain rate doesn't have to be a quick tempo for drizzle to deteriorate your visibility. Where if you have rain and showers, that will deteriorate your visibility, your rain rate, if it comes down really quickly. So I just want to say that the 1400 Zulu, one can see that it's scattered at 3.5, but no seg. So we're starting to see that, okay, in the forecast, there are CVs. So within your vicinity, you can still have CVs within that time period from 1300 to 21 Zulu, it was forecasted. And now at the OR, no report of your CB just yet. So this is the beginning of that forecast, so there's still some time. So that scattered at 3,000 feet could be a towering cumulus, which is still significant and hazardous to small aircrafts. So one needs to keep in mind that just because it says scattered at 3.5, it might be a normal cumulus, but it can also be a towering cumulus that also still has downdrafts, and that can still influence your flying. So where can you find all this information, your observational data? This is the aviation website. And under your observation tab, you can get your METARs, you can get radar, satellite, you can even get webcams, which is lovely for visual representation. And you can see under the colored coded METARs there, you can hover over them and it will actually decode what it means. So if it says scattered 035, you can hover over it and it will tell you what it means. At your radar, you can then find all your radars there, and your webcams. We've got one in George and Nelspruit. That's a really handy one that I've also found and use a lot. When flying towards that side to Kukuza, especially when that low cloud starts to push in from that northeast with that high that bridges every time behind that cold front. So normally it pushes in that low cloud, and then one can then use that webcam to slowly see if it's lifting and get the cloud base. Another thing that is really nice about the website is your AERO spot graph, your AERO spots tab, which is just under that home tab. It gives you a spot graph map, which gives you the vertical cross section, as well as a thunderstorm probability map. So one can see here, this was for the 18th of October for 15 Zulu valid. And then one can see there's actually 20% through to 60% in places forecasted. On the left is a satellite image, and it gives you also, I took it for 15 Zulu, just 15 minutes past, to do a quick comparison to actually show you that this forecast isn't too shabby. And it actually picked up well where those cells where you can see those white clumpiness, those are CBs with thick ice, so that's why it's super white. This satellite image uses temperature. That's why you can see that South Africa is quite dark, the ground, and the whiter it is, the higher the cloud. So you can see that cellular structure of those CBs. The red is thunderstorms, so you'll be seeing which ones are active, and it follows that that forecast quite well. So it's a good tool to use. The satellite is also a good tool. You'll be able to see where your low cloud is. Is it coming in? Is it pulling away? Is it, what your cloud's doing? You'll be able to even play it forwards and backwards. Another tool that one can use, other than the aviation website, because that uses a very fine resolution model, about 4.5 kilometers. If one thinks about a camera, the higher the number of your camera resolution, the better the image. So in modeling from a forecaster's perspective, the smaller the number, the better. So if we have a big grid of 400 by 500 kilometers, within that big block, we have then little blocks, pixels of 4.5 kilometers by 4.5 kilometers throughout that whole entire grid. And that makes it a finer resolution, so we can see more detail. These guys on Windy displays 4 models, which is also quite great to use in conjunction with each other. You will start to get to know them as well. We also use them on desk for the bigger picture. And for example, the ECMWF is a 9 kilometer resolution. We've got GFS, which is a global forecasting system, which is a 22 kilometer resolution. So those are a bit more coarse. And then also Windy gives a lot, also gives some satellite images, which is handy as well. And that's all from my side. I hope I've made sense and you guys have learned something. But thank you so much for your time.
Lauren, thank you so much for all your preparation and for that detailed and very interesting presentation. You always get me interested in these things. It's not something that I normally do on a day-to-day basis, but you hook me, and thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. And then, ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker for the night is Ari. But before we get to Ari Levine, just a reminder, if there are any questions, please put them in the chat box or in the Q&A tab in the bottom of your screen. Quibus Turin will be running through the questions after Ari has presented. So please, just any questions you've got, please just post them there and we'll get to them a little bit later. And Ari, welcome to you. And I must just say, Ari always brings such a human touch to our webinars. And it's a nice way for us to end tonight, Ari. So thank you so much for all of your efforts for preparation tonight. And on that note, over to you.
Thank you so much, Neil. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be talking tonight about fatigue. We're rapidly approaching the end of the year, and for most of us, our last holiday is a very distant memory, and hopefully we're looking forward to something over the December-January period. But chronic fatigue is a very real issue in aviation. So first, a little bit about Mayday. Who are we? We're a group of aviation license holders, and we volunteer to assist anybody in aviation that is in a crisis. We deal with incident response, accidents defusing and debriefing. We assist people with medical issues, loss of license, substance abuse, essentially any crisis that those of us in aviation may face. We're absolutely confidential. We're independent, and we don't report to anyone, not your aviation medical examiner, not the CAA, not the FAA, no airlines, no companies, no spouses, and no intelligence agencies. So if you need to talk to somebody, please reach out to us. The contact details are on your screen at the moment. So I think most of us know what fatigue is, but if you read the definition on your screen, it's technically accurate, but it fails to convey just how apathetic and exhausted we all feel from time to time. It does touch on some of the issues that make fatigue such a serious problem in aviation. And really, there are two types of stress. We've got acute stress and chronic stress. Now, acute or short-term fatigue is actually a normal daily occurrence, and it's quite easily resolved or cured by a sound sleep. But chronic fatigue is a much scarier beast, and that's what I'm going to focus on this evening. Chronic fatigue is generally caused by extended periods of high stress and lack of rest over extended periods. Some of the common stressors are uncertainty and conflict. And I think there are very few people in South Africa at the moment who don't have a degree of stress from uncertainty, whether it's about water supply, power supply, money supply, or just whether Lauren's forecast is correct and we're going to have a very, very wet summer. Family situations often lead to stress, as do financial issues. And the modern trend of everybody trying to be productive for every minute of every day is not really terribly healthy from a mental point of view. There are, of course, medical reasons for chronic fatigue, and it is something that needs to be discussed with a medical examiner if it's not something that resolves with some of the things we're going to talk about next. Some of the symptoms, there really are very many symptoms, and they're very varied. Even a quick glance at this incomplete list shows that this really is not an aviation-friendly condition. And that's true whether you're in the cockpit, in the control tower, in the cabin, or somebody working on an aircraft, keeping it airworthy. The memory fog is what I've chosen to illustrate in the slide. And for those of you who are wondering, no, an instrument rating does not permit flight in memory fog conditions. It doesn't help at all. Chronic fatigue has actually been found to be contributory to a significant number of incidents and accidents, and it may well be causative in some. One of the major issues for those involved in aviation is that we're very, very poor at assessing our level of fatigue. And the doctors have proved this. They've studied people physiologically. They've put monitors on them and asked them to report how tired they feel. And they've measured their heart rate and blood pressure and all of the other parameters that they monitor. And generally, people get it wrong. They report feeling moderately tired when in fact they are seriously affected. And particularly in aviation, there are two components of something called skill fatigue, which are not our friends. Timing disruption is when you perform a task and you perform it as usual, but the timing of each component of the task is slightly off, and it makes the entire operation less smooth and less fluid. And there's a really good chance that you will have some disruption in terms of completing the task. The other component of skill fatigue is the short version of it is tunnel vision. The fancy term you see on your screen is disruption of perceptual field. And what that actually means is your mind tends to focus on movements or objects in the center of your vision and blocks out what's happening in the periphery. Those of you who work in control towers or cockpits will recognize this is very, very bad news. It leads to a loss of accuracy and smoothness when manipulating controls, and the effects are magnified in high task environments. So turbulent weather, instrument flight, takeoff, landing, critical phases of flight, it's significantly worse. So these things are not our friends. How do we deal with it? Well, the good news is, the bad news is, the best remedy for chronic fatigue is the same as acute fatigue. It's sleep. We also need to talk about reducing stress or eliminating stress where possible, but sleep really is the major cure or the major treatment. And I know that this is far easier said than done, but it's vital for people to realize that there is no amount of willpower, experience, motivation, or stimulants that can allow one to just overcome fatigue. Even magic bean liquid, coffee for those of us over 15, is only a very temporary lift. It masks the symptoms. It does not render you fit for real duty. So sleep really is the ticket there. Things not to do. If you can't fall asleep within 15 to 20 minutes, don't lie awake. Get up. Do something to help you get sleepy. Watch some TV, nothing too violent, nothing too interesting. Maybe read a book or a magazine, listen to some music. But try that for half an hour, 45 minutes, and then try and go back to sleep. It's important also not to consume stimulants like caffeine or depressants like alcohol for a few hours before bedtime. It's also important not to eat a large meal before bed. Those of us who have experienced heartburn know exactly why that is. It's also a good idea not to take work to bed. And while exercise is really important, it's a good idea to try and avoid exercise within 2 to 3 hours of going to sleep. Medication to sleep is not something that should be considered unless it's prescribed by an AME, especially within 12 hours of flying. These things are absolute no-nos. Things that we should be trying to do. Be very mindful of the side effects of any medication that you may be taking. We're not talking about the so-called recreational pharmaceuticals. Those of you who've listened to me speak before will know that I don't believe those have any place in aviation. But even certain vitamins can have side effects that affect your sleep patterns. So make sure you understand what it is that you're taking and what it does. If you are suffering from a medical condition which may impact your sleep, please speak to your AME. Do exercise, just not within 2 to 3 hours of going to sleep. You don't want to be overstimulated when you go to bed. Try to form good sleep habits. I think there are a lot of people laughing right now at the 8 hours a night. I know I would love to be able to get 8 hours sleep a night, but really try for 7 if you can't, try for 8. And what's also quite important is to try and form a reasonably consistent bedtime. Not always possible for those of you who fly on a roster, but for those who don't, this is important. Ensure that your sleep environment is comfortable. Your bed is somewhere where you spend up to 1/3 of your life. It should be comfortable. You want a nice cool environment, and you also want somewhere that is dark. Light pollution is not your friend when it comes to quality sleep, and it can disrupt REM sleep, which means that you can wake up not feeling terribly rested. Naps are a very useful tool, assuming that you have time during the day to do it and somewhere appropriate. The cockpit's generally not a good place for a nap unless you really are trying to scare your co-pilot. If you do nap, limit it to no more than 30 minutes. There is something called sleep inertia, which can develop, which means that if you sleep for or nap for much longer than 30 minutes during the day, you may wake up feeling groggy and less rested than when you actually started your nap. And finally, please be honest with yourself. If you are feeling tired, do something about it. Take a nap. Make sure you get a good night's sleep. And if you're not up to flying, be honest about it. So, our takeaways. Stress is a very significant contributor to chronic fatigue. Where you can reduce or eliminate stress, it's a very good place to start. I'm not going to repeat all of the items from the previous talks about stress. You're welcome to look at the webinar recordings, and we'll probably do another webinar at some stage dealing with stress. But good sleep really is incredibly important, and it's vital to work on sleep hygiene and sleep habits. Fatigue really is a killer. You need to be realistic about the degree of fatigue and be honest with yourself, and match your activity to your degree of fatigue, if at all possible. Downtime, rest, and sleep are vital. And that's not just a good night's sleep, as important as that is not building up a sleep deficit. It's making sure you have enough time away from work and not trying to fill every minute of every day with something productive. Hobbies, family, pets, all of these things have a place. So with that, I'm going to repeat. These are the Mayday contact details. If you need us, please call us. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ari. That's great. I'll definitely take you up on that. I'll have a proper sleep tonight and a nap tomorrow. So there we go.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ari. That was great. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the time in the evening where we're going to attend to some of your questions. I'm going to ask Quibus and all our panelists to switch their cameras on, and Quibus will pose the questions to the relevant panelist. So Quibus, over to you.
Oh, thanks, team. Thank you very much. So far, there's only been one question from Caniso, asked, what does AME stand for? Thank you, Andre. You mentioned that it's the Aviation Medical Examiner. You know, that's what doctors we're supposed to go and see when we don't feel well. I just want to see if there was another question. I think that was pretty much it. So you guys did well. I mean, there's not even questions. So thank you, and nice to see you, Brian, and Jochi also on the panel. And if I could just summarize or take away from this, Andre has showed you which communications tools you can buy from him, which are available. And please use it. And you can phone Lauren or the weather service and get your weather forecast before you fly. And if you don't feel well, use that phone and phone Ari or Mayday so they can help you. So the one actually followed very nicely on the other one. And Neil, thanks to you and Anli as well. I don't know if there's any of the other presenters that would like to say something as well, but that was it with the questions. Thank you.
Just one thing Kobus, if I may. Andre, you've got a convert.
Oh, that's quick.
Good, that's good.
I was going to see you dump it in the water and then it works. Then,
I wanted to show you this, the burner phone. Look, impact resistant.
So yeah, thanks so very much. So over to you, Neil. I don't know if any of the presenters still wants to say something.
No, you're all good. Okay, then that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Just a thank you to our speakers for the efforts in preparing for tonight. And really, it's the sole purpose is to keep you all safer by being better prepared. And then also when Ari is involved, just a little bit of introspection as well. Just be honest and truthful with yourself. And then to all the delegates, thank you for joining. And if you haven't attended our previous webinars, they're available on our AERO South Africa website. So please head to the website and view all our past webinars. And on that note, we're going to close. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Take care.